The orbital Xelian habitat rotated slowly above a barren, cratered moon known in galactic charts as Trelos Minor, a place forgotten by most, useful only for low-orbit research and rehabilitation work. It was quiet here, purposefully remote. Inside Unit D9, isolation clung to every surface. The walls were matte gray, marked with subtle scuffs from maintenance bots. The overhead lights flickered once, then steadied. That was normal. Nothing here was elegant, just functional. Quiet. Predictable. Empty. Kalira Vel then sat in her hover chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. The chair, built from gleaming Xelian alloys and human stabilizers, made a soft electronic click each time it adjusted her position to maintain spinal alignment. She hated it. Every shift reminded her she wasn't moving of her own power. 15 cycles ago, she had been a high command scout for the Xelian Strike Corps. She led rapid recon missions across unstable sectors and deep ice terrains, her name associated with precision and fearlessness. Then came Vega V, a collapsed glacier, a misstep, and half her body stopped responding. Spinal trauma. No regeneration. Xelian medicine declared it irreversible. They issued her a hover chair, stripped her of command status, and transferred her off-world. She hadn't spoken to another Xelian face-to-face in over 6 months. Now, a Terran was arriving. She didn't want him here. A soft tone chimed across the ceiling, a proximity alarm. The shuttle was docking. Her fingers tightened over the chair's armrest. She'd reviewed the file already. Dr. Mason Creed, 41 Terran standard years. Former biomedical military engineer. Specialized in adaptive prosthetics and interface augmentation. Transferred to the Galactic Civilian Rehabilitation Initiative 3 years ago. This wasn't his first encounter with Xelian anatomy, but it would be his most complicated. The door slid open with a pressurized hiss. She didn't turn. Boots tapped slowly across the floor, deliberate, steady. The weight of a man used to being in control, but cautious in new territory. Commander Kalira Veldan, he said, stopping 2 meters behind her. I'm Dr. Mason Creed. I was told you agreed to the preliminary consultation. Still facing the window, Kalira responded coolly. I said I'd let you talk. Mason didn't push further. He remained quiet for a few seconds, studying the room. How clean it was, how empty. No personal effects. Not even a data console near the bed. Just the essentials. She was a soldier, even now. He set his case down on the small work table and opened it. The magnetic clasps clicked. You were injured during a mission on Vega V. Extensive spinal damage. T7 through L2 vertebrae. Full lower body paralysis. You were conscious when it happened. She turned slowly, her hover chair pivoting with mechanical precision. Her eyes, dark violet, almost black, locked onto his. Yes. He nodded, adjusting the interface on his tablet. And since then, no successful regeneration? None. Your kind isn't the first to try. I know. Then why are you here? Her tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, impassive, but the tension in her shoulders gave her away. She was tired. Not just physically, but of false hope. Mason looked up from the screen. Because we're not using regeneration. I'm proposing full lower body replacement, external exolegs controlled through a neural interface we developed 2 years ago. I build them custom, 1 patient at a time. She frowned. You want to cut off what's left of me? No, he said firmly. I want to give you back what your people stopped fighting for. The words hit harder than he expected. She leaned forward slightly, jaw set. You've read the file. Then you know what happens to a Xelian who can't walk. They reclassify you. You lose caste status. You lose authority. You disappear. The chair makes sure you never forget it. I read it, Mason said. But I also saw your combat records. 37 successful ops. No losses under your command. You're not someone who disappears. Kalira studied him in silence. He didn't look away. What do you get out of this? She asked eventually. I'm a civilian now, he replied. Earth pays me to restore function to wounded veterans. Doesn't matter which species. You're not special. You're just next. She smirked faintly at his bluntness. He tapped on the datapad. A projection lit up between them, a clean, sharp rendering of cybernetic legs. Matte black, jointed with reactive servos, shaped close to human in structure, but modular to accommodate her frame. Lightweight and powerful. They'll be grafted to the base of your spinal cord, he explained, using a mesh bridge built from your own neural tissue. No signal lag. Movement becomes instinctive within weeks. You'll fall a lot at first. It'll hurt. It'll feel wrong. But it won't be passive. You'll have control. She looked at the hologram with cold focus. Others tried before, she said. None of them were me. Kalira tilted her head slightly. You're confident? No, he said. I'm prepared. That answer surprised her. Another silence fell. Mason leaned forward. I'll give you a full diagnostic scan tomorrow. If your spine can take the graft, we begin calibration the next day. Surgery follows. I didn't say yes, she replied. You didn't say no. Mason stood. That's usually enough for a start. He packed the datapad away, secured his case, and walked to the door. It opened silently, but just before he stepped out, she called to him. You don't seem like the military type. He paused. I was. Then I learned sometimes saving one person is more important than winning the war. She didn't respond. He left without waiting for more. The door slid closed. Alone again, Kalira rolled back toward the viewport. Her face gave nothing away, but her eyes were restless now. He was right. She hadn't said no, but saying yes meant giving someone else control over her body again. That terrified her more than she would admit. Still, she couldn't deny the one truth she kept locked behind all the silence and the sarcasm. She wanted to walk again. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to be seen again. Not as a symbol, not as a crippled warrior, just as Kalira, capable, standing. She sat in silence for another hour, staring at the stars beyond the moon, fingers drumming lightly on the metal armrest. Somewhere inside, she had already made the decision. Tomorrow, she would let him scan her spine. That would be the first step. She wouldn't look back. The diagnostics room was warmer than her quarters, though still wrapped in the same sterile dullness. Kalira Velden sat upright on the scanning table, her arms resting at her sides. She wore a sleeveless gray medical tunic, standard issue, open at the back to allow access to the spinal ridge. Her eyes flicked across the ceiling's recessed lights, following the slow pulse of the energy monitors as if to distract herself from the tension building in her stomach. Mason stood to her left, checking the calibration of the scanner arc hovering just above her. His movements were methodical, efficient without being rushed. His sleeves were rolled back to his elbows, revealing lean, scarred forearms. Not military anymore, maybe, but his hands still moved like a man who'd spent years under pressure. Let me know if anything feels off, he said without looking at her. Kalira kept her voice even, like being exposed in a Terran-built machine surrounded by unknown code. Mason glanced at her. It's custom-built. The code's mine. No network connection. No data leaks. Your records stay here. She didn't answer, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. He pressed the control pad. The scanner glowed to life, casting a soft orange light across her lower back. Thin beams swept slowly up her spine. She felt a faint vibration in her skin, strange but not painful. Mason's eyes tracked the scan lines on the monitor. Fractures at L1 and L2 are clean. Minimal scar tissue. You were lucky. She scoffed. Is that what you call it? Most people with your injuries can't breathe without assistance. Most people weren't trained to ignore pain. He nodded slightly, accepting that without comment. The scan finished. Mason tapped through several screens in silence, then rotated the display toward her. The holographic model of her spine was detailed. Every microfracture, every calcified nerve ending displayed with brutal clarity. This, he pointed, is where we'll install the mesh bridge. Your nerve clusters are still reactive, weak but intact. That's good. The tech I'm using is aggressive. It won't wait for your body to play catch up. She leaned in. How much control will I have? 85% within the first month. Higher with daily calibration. These won't just respond to you. They'll evolve with you. And if I lose control mid-movement, you'll fall. She looked at him flatly. That's not acceptable. I didn't say it was. I said it was possible. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Kalira could see that he wasn't trying to reassure her. He was giving her the truth without sugarcoating. That, strangely, put her more at ease than any false promise would have. She broke the silence. When I fell back on Vega V, I didn't black out. I felt the whole thing. The impact, the freezing. I kept trying to stand until my lungs collapsed. Mason didn't interrupt. He listened quietly, letting her continue on her own terms. They pulled me out with a crawler. I remember the pilot. He didn't say a word the whole way back. Didn't even look at me. Just drove. Her voice was tight but steady. That was the last mission I commanded. Mason spoke carefully. Did they offer treatment? She shook her head. They offered silence and reassignment to the orbital hospice platform. I refused. They sent me here. He folded his arms. Why refuse the hospice? Because I wasn't dying. That's why I'm here. For the first time, she allowed herself a small nod. He gestured toward the far end of the room. I've got the first prototype ready. You want to see them? She hesitated, not out of fear, but out of what it meant to say yes. He waited without pressure. She pushed herself upright. Show me. They entered the adjacent lab chamber. Inside, against the far wall, a stasis rack held the prototype legs, matte black, compact, almost predatory in design. Each joint was articulated with reactive servos, low-profile dampeners, and anchored with hex grip pads at the soles. They didn't look like anything from the Zelian database. Kalira approached slowly. They're Terran in shape. Modified to your frame, Mason said. Thicker femur line, lighter tibial alloy, center balanced to counteract your core posture. She crouched down slightly, tracing a finger along the femoral housing. It was warm to the touch, not mechanical, responsive. The tech was alive in its own way. Have you tested these on anyone else? No one like you. She stood again. What if I reject the neural mesh? Then we shut down the system and remove it. No permanent damage. No risk to the upper spinal cord. Kalira stared at the legs a long time, her mind moving fast behind her steady exterior. This wasn't just about walking. It was about reclaiming identity, dignity. Everything the chair symbolized would be gone. But so would the protection of being written off. She'd be visible again, exposed. She hated that she still hesitated. Mason broke the silence. You can back out. Nothing begins without your word. I know, she replied, but she didn't move. Not yet. Then, after a long breath, she spoke quietly. Schedule the procedure. Mason nodded once. Tomorrow, 0600. No food 8 hours before. I'll prep the sedative mix and finalize the graph calibration tonight. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. If this fails, it won't, he said. I'm not afraid of the pain, she clarified. But if I wake up in that chair again, still stuck, I don't know what I'll become. He looked at her without blinking. Then I won't let you wake up like that. The door closed behind her. Inside the lab, the black limbs waited in silence, balanced, precise, and ready. Kalira didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, not even anticipation. She stayed awake because for the first time in years, there was something real to look forward to. Kalira sat on the surgical table, spine pressed straight against the cold surface, eyes fixed on the ceiling's flat white panels. The hum of sterilization filters pulsed rhythmically overhead. Her pulse, however, was uneven, tight in her throat, despite her rigid composure. The room was quiet except for the soft tapping of Mason's gloved fingers against the console beside her. He hadn't spoken much since she arrived, other than to confirm the checklist. That suited her. She didn't want comfort. She didn't want reassurance. She wanted precision. The last time she laid down like this, she had been bleeding out beneath a sheet of ice. That memory pressed into her chest like weight. She swallowed hard. Vitals stable, Mason said, eyes flicking to the display. Oxygen normal. Muscle tension elevated. I'm not nervous, she muttered. I didn't say you were, he replied calmly. Your body disagrees, but it doesn't matter. It'll go under in less than 60 seconds. She looked sideways at the injector unit. You're sure the neural bridge won't interfere with my long-term memory? We're not touching the hippocampus. You'll remember everything. Good, she said. I want to remember this. Mason leaned over, syringe already loaded. Head straight. Breathe in. The sedative was cool entering her system. Her vision dimmed slowly, but her mind didn't let go immediately. Thoughts lingered. What if she didn't wake up? What if the connection didn't take? Would her body reject it? Would the legs move without her? Or worse, refuse to move at all? The hum of the scanner faded. Her last sight was the sterile light blurring into a long tunnel above her. Then black. She woke to silence. Not the silence of unconsciousness, but the sterile, heavy silence of recovery. Her head felt thick. She blinked slowly. The light above was softer than the harsh surgical lamps. The ceiling was different, textured, not smooth. Her quarters? No. Recovery bay. She became aware of pressure in her lower body. Foreign, but not painful. Tight at first, not like muscles returning after sleep. Different, deeper, internal. Kalira shifted slightly. Something moved. Below. She froze. The sheets rustled over her legs. Legs. Mason's voice came from her right. Calm. Controlled. You're awake earlier than expected. She turned her head. He stood by the wall console, arms crossed, watching her. I can feel them, she said, voice rough from disuse. Not clearly, but they're there. They're linked. Still calibrating. I've kept movement locked at minimum response to avoid overload. Her fingers twitched. Her breathing shallowed. Unlock them, she said. He hesitated. You need to adjust gradually. Unlock them. Mason tapped his panel once. The sensation was immediate, like a current moving through her spine and lighting something dormant. Her thighs tightened. The implant points under her skin flexed slightly. She could feel the servos react to her intent, even if the movement was sluggish and incomplete. She slowly sat up, arms tense at her sides. Her balance wasn't right. Her weight distribution was off. She felt too tall already. Don't try to stand, Mason warned. You'll fall. I have to. Not yet. She ignored him. Shifting sideways, Kalira pushed one hand in the bed and lowered her legs off the edge. The weight surprised her. They were heavier than she expected, but balanced. The implants pressed against her lower spine, the connection humming. She gripped the nearby railing, adjusted her feet, then slowly applied pressure. The first attempt failed. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed forward into Mason's arms. I said not yet, he muttered, steadying her. Let go. You'll break your face. Let go. He released her gently. She leaned on the railing, chest heaving. She didn't fall. Both legs trembled beneath her weight, micro-adjustments firing in waves down the limbs. Her grip tightened. Sweat beaded at her brow. I'm standing, she whispered. Mason didn't reply. I'm standing, she repeated louder. The neural interface pinged again, recognizing movement cues, interpreting pressure points. Her balance shifted and the servos adjusted. She took one slow, uncertain step, then another. The third one failed. She fell hard, knees slamming against the padded floor. Pain flared through her thigh. Real, physical pain, not from the legs but from the effort. Mason was already crouching beside her. That's enough for today. But she was grinning, barely but there. No, it's not. He stared at her. You'll hurt yourself. I've been hurt, she said. This is different. Mason hesitated, then stood and extended a hand. She took it, pulling herself upright. The second time was smoother. They walked together, only a few meters, but each step was deliberate. Her body wasn't ready. Her muscles screamed. Her balance was a mess, but her control was hers. At the door, she stopped. How long until I'm walking unaided? Depends how stubborn you are. She glanced at him. You see my record. Then 2 weeks. Maybe less. She nodded once, then stepped away from the railing, unsupported. 3 steps. Then 4. She turned back toward him. Why did you stay in the room? What do you mean? Most doctors leave after surgery. I wanted to see if you'd actually listen to medical advice. She cracked a smile just slightly. I didn't. I know, he said. They stood in silence a moment, facing each other. She was still taller in the chair, but now, standing, she was level with him. Kalira reached out and pressed her fingers lightly against the wall. Her legs didn't wobble this time. When she finally sat back down, Mason watched her carefully. You'll feel exhausted by the end of today. I've been exhausted for 15 years. Then this will be a different kind. She looked at him closely. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you, he replied. Kalira rested her arms on the chair. Begin training protocol tomorrow. I want full mobility. You'll get it. And after that, he paused. We figure out what you want. She didn't answer. Not yet. But the question stayed in her mind. What did she want now? She no longer felt invisible, and that terrified her more than the fall. Training began at 0500. Kalira stood in the reinforced rehabilitation chamber, its walls lined with impact-dampening panels and pressure monitors. Overhead, tracking sensors adjusted automatically to her position. The lighting was brighter than she liked, clinical and unflattering, but she said nothing. She wore a matte black training suit, sleeveless, form-fitting, reinforced along the spine to protect the neural mesh ports. Her hair was tied tightly behind her head. Mason stood by the wall console, adjusting the trajectory parameters on the holographic interface. He wore the same dark utility uniform as before, but the sleeves were down today. He looked more focused, quieter. Today isn't about walking, he said. It's about control. She was already in a low stance, knees slightly bent, the artificial limbs flexed and calibrated. Define control. You fall, we reset. You break something, we repair it. But you don't push beyond failure point. Not yet. Understood. The floor beneath her feet lit up with a pale blue grid. Each square reacted to weight and pressure. Visual feedback from Mason's diagnostic interface. A mechanical chime signaled the start of the first test. She moved, not slowly this time. 2 steps forward, pivot, left foot up and hold. Her balance shifted slightly. The leg readjusted, overcorrected, then steadied. A ping echoed softly, positive response. Mason watched silently, noting micro wobbles and torque inconsistencies. Your left actuator is lagging by 4 milliseconds. I noticed, then corrected. She shifted again, this time holding the position longer, her artificial muscles tensing just under the synthetic skin. Mason keyed in a minor correction. You know, you're adapting faster than predicted. I wasn't built for sitting still, she replied. They continued for another hour. Movements became sharper, faster. Occasionally, she stumbled, but she caught herself every time. Not once did she fall. By the second hour, sweat coated her back. The prosthetic legs responded almost seamlessly now, but they drained her energy faster than expected. Every shift in direction triggered a wave of effort she hadn't needed to exert in years. When Mason finally called a halt, she didn't argue. She dropped onto the bench at the edge of the room, breathing hard but stable. You want me to lie and tell you I'm not tired? She asked. No, he said. I want you to acknowledge it. She didn't reply, just sat in silence, watching her chest rise and fall. After a moment, she spoke. When I said yes to the surgery, I didn't think this part would feel harder than the recovery. It's not your body that's resisting anymore, Mason said. It's the part of you that got used to disappearing. She looked at him, that struck closer than he realized. He continued, carefully. You haven't asked me why I left Earth. I assumed you didn't want to talk about it. I didn't, but you should know. She waited. I was a military engineer. I designed prosthetics for soldiers injured during the conflict with Anhari. We pushed upgrades too fast. One model had a feedback loop issue we missed in testing. One squad was deployed with them. He paused. They died because of my design flaw. Kalira didn't speak. She waited for him to continue. I left Earth after the tribunal cleared me. Voluntary reassignment. I thought if I couldn't fix what I did, I'd at least make sure no one else went through that. She considered his words carefully. So this is penance. It was, until I met you. That caught her off guard. What changed? You don't want sympathy. You want a life back. That's not guilt talking. That's fire. I can work with that. She stood slowly, wiping sweat from her neck. Is that why you stayed in the recovery room? I watched a lot of people wake up from that surgery. Most of them don't want to move. You didn't hesitate. I was afraid, she admitted. Still am. Then we're even. She met his gaze again. This time, the silence wasn't cold. It was mutual recognition. Later that evening, Kalira returned to her quarters alone. She walked, unaided, the full length of the corridor, slowly, but without support. Once inside, she locked the door behind her, then stood in front of the small mirror above the sink. She stared at herself for a long time. The legs were hers now. She could see it in the way they moved, the way they stood still under her control. The synthetic panels hugged her frame perfectly, matte black against her bronze skin. No longer foreign, no longer invasive, just hers. Still, a question lingered in her mind, a quiet uncertainty that hadn't found words yet. What happens after she's whole again? Was there still a place for her in the Xelian world? Would the council recognize her as a warrior again? Would she even want them to? She sat on the edge of the bed, stretching her legs slowly. No pain, no clicks, just smooth motion. Her hands brushed across the joint lines. Mason believed in her recovery. That much was clear. But what about after that? What came next? The thought stayed with her into the night, long after the lights dimmed and the room settled into silence. She didn't sleep easily, not because of pain, but because she no longer knew what future she was walking toward. And for the first time, she had to admit she wanted someone else to help her figure it out. Kalira woke before the alarm. The chamber was dark, lit only by the faint pulse of the bedside status panel. Her eyes adjusted quickly. The familiar hum of the station's oxygen system droned on in the background, unchanging. She sat up slowly, bare feet touching the cool floor, another small act of defiance. Her legs, now fully integrated, responded instantly. She stood without hesitation. No hesitation had become her new metric for progress. The neural mesh was no longer just technology, it was instinct now. She didn't think about movement anymore. She just moved. She dressed quickly. Tight training uniform, utility belt, wristband monitor. Functional, nothing ceremonial. There was still no uniform to return to. She was still no one, officially. Mason was already in the diagnostics lab when she arrived. He didn't turn as she entered. "You're early. So are you. I ran a systems stress test on the mesh overnight," he said, tapping his console. It held up beyond spec. "You're adapting faster than my fastest baseline." "I'm not interested in records." "That's fine. I am." She walked across the room, her steps firm now. The slight artificial echo of her footfalls still differentiated them from organic steps, but the sound was tighter, sharper, cleaner. He finally turned to face her. "How's your balance?" "Stable." "Pain?" "None." "Any emotional instability?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's your medical question?" He didn't flinch. "It's protocol. I need to know what you're processing." Kalira crossed her arms. "I'm processing the fact that I'm operational. Nothing else. Is that what you're telling me, or yourself?" She didn't answer. He let the silence stretch. Eventually, she looked past him at the field training sim loading behind the transparent wall. "I want combat protocols today," she said. He stepped aside, already prepared. "But there's something you need to know before we start." She watched him carefully. Mason tapped the panel. A hollow display flickered on, showing a list of incoming transport logs. He zoomed in on one, a Xelian courier craft, arriving in 2 days. She stiffened. "Council, not officially, but I guess yes. Your recovery's been logged in the central record. Someone flagged the file. They abandoned me." "They did," he agreed. "Now they want to see what's changed." She turned away from the display. "I don't owe them anything." "I agree. But you should decide what you're going to do before they step into this room." Kalira stepped closer to the sim interface. "Are they coming to evaluate me?" "Most likely. To decide whether to reinstate you. Or to remind you that even with legs, you're still not one of them." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't walk again to ask permission." Mason met her gaze. "Then show them why they're irrelevant." The simulation chamber powered on. The lights dimmed, replaced by artificial sunlight and rocky terrain projections. The system generated a scenario based on her past missions, a Vega V ambush sim. Snow, minimal cover. For hostiles. She stepped in, locking her wrists into the signal cuffs. Her body dropped into combat stance automatically. The simulation began. She didn't hesitate. 2 minutes and 17 seconds later, the sim ended. For targets neutralized. 1 evasion. 0 falls. She exited the chamber, breathing hard, sweat down her temples, heart hammering, but her balance never broke. Mason handed her a towel. You just beat your old record by 5 seconds. She took it, wiping her face. The old me would have done it cleaner. She was working with organic legs. You did it after 15 years in a chair. Kalira looked at her hands. They were trembling, not from fatigue, but adrenaline. What happens if the council tries to pull rank? She asked. They won't. They'll test you, press you, try to box you into obedience. And if I say no, Mason paused. Then you're free. The idea hung in the air, heavy, unfamiliar. Free, not reassigned, not reinstated, just free. Kalira left the lab in silence. In her quarters, she showered quickly, then stood in front of the mirror again. This time, she saw someone different. Not the ghost of a warrior, not a patient. Someone who could make her own decisions now. Without approval, without permission. But that question from before remained. What did she want? Revenge? Recognition? Or something else entirely? Her reflection stared back. Unyielding. Tomorrow, the ship would dock. She would be ready. Not to prove herself to them, but to prove that she didn't need them at all. The Zelian courier vessel docked at 0840 standard. Kalira stood at the observation deck window long before it arrived. She watched the sleek obsidian hull align with the station's dorsal lock. No emblem, no signal flares, just clinical efficiency. That was their style. Cold, precise, impersonal. She knew what they do. Protocol dictated a brief courtesy visit, followed by a medical assessment, and finally a council interview. Off record, of course. They'd act as if this was an act of compassion, a bureaucratic necessity. It wasn't. It was damage control. Her survival was an inconvenience. Mason entered quietly. She didn't turn around. You don't have to speak to them. She exhaled, arms crossed over her chest. If I don't, they'll write their own version of the story. Does their version still matter? I don't know, she said, but I want to look them in the eye when I say it doesn't. He didn't argue. At 0930, two Zelian officials stepped into the diagnostics bay. One male, one female. Both wore formal drapes of deep silver and black, traditional council attire. Their expressions were unreadable. Their names didn't matter. They represented the structure that once discarded her. Kalira stood waiting, flanked by Mason. She wore the full interface suit, clean, armored, proudly revealing the integrated legs without shame or augmentation cover. The woman scanned her from head to toe. You look functional, Kalira replied without blinking. I'm more than that. The man stepped forward. We are here on behalf of the Restoration Subcommittee. We understand you've undergone Terran corrective surgery. It wasn't corrective, she said. It was transformative. That's a matter of perspective. No, Mason interjected. It's a matter of results. She was listed as permanently disabled. She isn't anymore. They ignored him. The woman continued. You are aware that your reclassification as non-combatant remains unchanged. Kalira's jaw clenched. I'm also aware that status is based on mobility. I have mobility. Through foreign tech. Through willingness, she said. Something you all lacked. The man glanced at the neural data console. You've submitted to physical performance exams? I submitted to war. For 2 decades. I don't know you tests. The woman raised an eyebrow. Then why are you speaking with us at all? Kalira stepped forward, her movements fluid and measured. Because I wanted you to see me. Standing. Walking. Not forgotten. Not erased. I wanted you to understand that what you left behind, what you labeled as discarded, is now better than it was before. Neither of them spoke. Kalira waited. I assume this means you are requesting reinstatement, the man said flatly. She shook her head. No. They glanced at each other. I'm not returning to your ranks. I'm not asking for rank or clearance. I'm telling you, I'm free from your system. I no longer operate under it. You can't separate from the Zelian command. I already have. The silence that followed was profound. No argument. No threat. Just discomfort. She could see in their posture. She wasn't a liability anymore. She was a variable, a challenge to their authority. And she had nothing left they could take from her. Mason remained still beside her, saying nothing, letting her handle it herself. After a moment, The woman adjusted her robes. Very well. We'll note your status as independent. Kalira nodded once. Do that. Then leave. The officials left without another word. When the door closed, she stood silently for a moment. Her breathing was shallow, her hands tight at her sides. Mason finally spoke. How do you feel? Like I closed a door I should have slammed years ago. He walked over to her. You don't need to explain it to anyone. I know, she said, but I needed to say it out loud. To them. He nodded. Then what now? She looked around the room, not as a patient, not as a visitor, but as someone with choices again. I don't know yet, she said, but for the first time, I'm not waiting for orders. That night, they sat across from each other in the common area, 2 mugs of steaming synth coffee between them. No uniforms, no official roles. She leaned back in her chair, legs stretched comfortably in front of her. Mason studied her for a moment. Are you still afraid? She nodded once. Yes, but I'm no longer afraid of being broken. He held her gaze. Then what are you afraid of now? She didn't answer immediately. Her voice was quiet when it came. Of not knowing who I am outside of what I was trained to be. He leaned forward. Then let's find out. The silence between them wasn't tense now. It was full, filled with understanding, something tentative and new. She didn't move away when his hand brushed lightly against hers on the table. She didn't pretend not to notice. And when she finally looked at him, really looked, there was no armor left. Just Kalira, alive, standing, and choosing what came next. The training chamber had been quiet for 3 days. Kalira hadn't returned to it. Not because she couldn't, because she didn't need to. She had passed every mobility test, outperformed the highest reaction benchmarks. Mason had logged her neural integration at 98.6% efficiency. The prosthetics no longer registered as foreign to her body. They moved like extensions of thought. Her strides were natural now, fluid, powerfully silent. Still, she wasn't sure what to do with that power anymore. She stood on the external catwalk now, wearing a plain thermal cloak. The stars stretched endlessly above, the moon's surface glinting below. There was no sound but her own breath through the mask, controlled, steady, unsure. Freedom had always been a concept talked about in strategy rooms, in mission planning, political speeches, but not like this. Not quiet, not cold, not so completely hers. Behind her, Mason approached. She didn't turn. You walk like a Terran. That's speciesist, he said lightly. It's true. He stopped beside her, arms folded. You've been out here for an hour. I've been thinking. Dangerous. She didn't smile, but her tone softened. About what's next? He didn't interrupt. I thought I'd want vengeance, she said. Or reinstatement. Or recognition. And now, I just want a place to exist where none of those things matter. He nodded. That's not the same as peace. No, she agreed. But it's a start. They stood together in the silence for a while. The stars drifted. The station's metal groaned softly under atmosphere pressure. Eventually, she spoke again. I need to leave the station. He glanced sideways at her. For how long? Indefinitely. I don't belong here anymore. This place was for recovery. I'm recovered. Mason didn't try to change her mind. Where will you go? There's a civilian contract planet, Elysier 2. Terraforming colony. They need security. Logistics. Pilots. Builders. You want to dig ditches and protect fuel tanks. I want to build something. From scratch. Something no one can take from me. He nodded slowly. That sounds like you. She turned toward him. Come with me. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. I wasn't expecting that. I know, she said. That's why I asked. He looked away briefly, then back to her. You'll still have to fight. There's corruption out there. Corporate overreach. Smugglers. Terraforming tech failures. It's not a peaceful life. I don't want peace, she said. I want purpose. He stepped closer. If I come with you, it's not as your doctor. I'm not your patient. Silence again. Then his voice, quiet, grounded. All right. She exhaled through her nose, a tension she hadn't noticed lifting from her chest. They returned inside together. The departure shuttle left 3 days later. No ceremony, no audience, just departure clearance, a signed independence declaration, and an uploaded request for neutral ID status. Kalira sat in the pilot's seat, hands firm on the controls. The synthetic muscles in her legs twitched subtly as she adjusted the pressure pedals. Her spine was straight, her eyes calm. Mason sat beside her, checking the navigational path. Long flight. I'm not in a hurry, she said. As the shuttle detached from the station, the stars shifted behind them. The station grew smaller. The past with it. Kalira reached forward, adjusting the throttle. Let's find out who I am now. Mason smiled faintly. I think you already know. She didn't answer. Not directly. But when she guided the shuttle toward the system's exit corridor, her hands didn't tremble. She was not a soldier, not a symbol, not a cast-off. She was something else now. And she was done waiting for someone else to define it. The colony perimeter on a leisure too shimmered in the mid-afternoon heat. The atmosphere was breathable but thin, just enough to keep lungs working without assistance. Rows of temporary structures lined the orange-red soil, habitation pods, storage bunkers, satellite towers. Further out, terraforming turbines pulsed rhythmically, releasing regulated streams of coolant vapor into the dry sky. Kalira stood at the edge of the worksite, visor clipped to her belt, sweat darkening the collar of her shirt. Her boots pressed into the dust, each step anchored by muscle and synthetic precision. Around her, colonists moved with determined rhythm, hauling equipment, calibrating weather towers, welding transport frames. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, tangible. No rank, no ceremony, no permission needed. It had been 6 weeks since she and Mason arrived. In that time, Kalira had taken over site coordination, security, logistics, patrol routes. She hadn't asked for the role. People just started turning to her when things needed order. She spoke clearly. She moved with purpose. And unlike the distant executives on the orbital relay, she was out here, bleeding in the heat with the rest of them. Mason worked in the fabrication dome, overseeing the assembly of exosuits and atmospheric recyclers. They saw each other daily, during meals, during equipment failures, during long nights, cataloging structural weaknesses. And some nights, after everyone else had gone quiet, they talked. Not about war, not about loss, but about what came next. Today, as the sun dipped low over the crater rim, Mason approached her on the ridge. He carried a datapad in one hand and a canister of rehydration gel in the other. You forgot to log today's patrol report, he said, handing her the canister. She took it without looking. I logged it verbally to Central Control. Controls automated. Exactly. He smirked. They stood side by side for a while, watching a storm wall roll slowly across the far horizon. No threat, just static and pressure. Kalira drank from the canister, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Mason broke the silence. There's been a message. She turned slightly. From where? Not where. Who? He handed her the datapad. It was from Zelian Command. Simple. Cold. Reinstatement offer. Voluntary redeployment approved. Kalira stared at the words for a long time. No rank. No apology. Just permission. She passed the datapad back without comment. You're not even going to think about it? Mason asked. No. They're offering status. Influence. Return to the hierarchy. I didn't leave to return, she said. He waited. What do you want, Kalira? Her answer was immediate. This. She gestured to the colony. The uneven landscape. The crews working with sweat and patience. The cracked turbines. The half-finished irrigation pipe. This chaos. This effort. These people. I earned these legs to build something. Not to be a symbol again. Mason didn't press further. They headed back toward the main compound together. Inside their shared quarters, Kalira stripped off her work shirt and tossed it into the wash bin. Her skin shimmered with dried sweat and dust. Her prosthetic limbs, marked now by scratches and field modifications, flexed silently as she lowered herself into the chair near the small desk. Mason was at the counter, prepping 2 heat packs for their evening meal. She watched him in silence. Why did you follow me here? She asked. He didn't look up. Because you stopped surviving and started living. I didn't want to miss what came next. She nodded. After dinner, she stood by the window. The stars were different in this part of the galaxy. Fewer, but sharper. Stillness hummed across the dome as wind passed over the structure in slow, hollow waves. She turned toward him. You know you're part of this now, right? He looked at her, serious, steady. I've known for a while. She stepped closer. There was no hesitation in her walk now. Her legs, her body, her will, everything in alignment. She touched his chest, just above his heart. Then stay. Build this with me, whatever it becomes. He covered her hand with his. I already am. They didn't kiss. Not yet. They just stood there. Close. Certain. Steady. Outside, the wind kicked up dust and static, but inside the dome, everything was quiet. Kalira was no longer waiting, no longer trying to return to who she had been. She had walked away from the ruins of her old life and kept walking until she built a new one. Here, in the dirt and light, with people who mattered and someone who saw her as she wasn't broken. She was home, and this time, she wasn't going anywhere.